The red-tailed hawk stretched its wings against the New Mexico sky, as Rebecca Zimmerman released the leather jesses that had bound it. Watching the magnificent bird catch an updraft and soar toward freedom over the dusty landscape of Raton in the summer of 1878. She had spent 3 months nursing the injured raptor back to health, and now it was time to let go, just as she always did with the broken creatures that found their way to her small ranch on the outskirts of town. The hawk circled once, twice, then disappeared over the mountains, and Rebecca felt the familiar ache of release mixed with joy that accompanied every successful rehabilitation. She wiped her hands on her leather apron and turned toward the barn where 2 more birds awaited her attention. A kestrel with a damaged wing and a young prairie falcon that had been shot by some careless hunter were healing in the makeshift aviary she had constructed from old chicken wire and salvaged lumber. The work was solitary but fulfilling, and it suited Rebecca just fine after the chaos of her earlier years in Philadelphia. At 24, she had already lived what felt like 3 different lives. The first as the daughter of a wealthy banker who had expected her to marry well and produce grandchildren. The second as a rebellious young woman who had scandalized society by studying with a falconer instead of attending finishing school. And now this third life, alone in the New Mexico territory, where she could pursue her passion without the judgment of Eastern society pressing down on her shoulders. The sun beat mercilessly on the dry earth as she walked back to the barn, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The drought had been hard on everyone this year, and many of the smaller ranchers were struggling to keep their cattle alive. Rebecca's operation was modest enough that she could manage with the well water, but she worried about the winter ahead. Her savings from selling her mother's jewelry would not last forever, and she needed to figure out a way to make the ranch profitable beyond the occasional thanks she received from grateful townspeople whose animals she had healed. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn, shading her eyes against the bright afternoon sun. A rider was approaching from the direction of town, moving at a steady pace that suggested purpose rather than urgency. As the figure drew closer, Rebecca could make out a tall man on a paint horse, his hat pulled low against the glare. She did not recognize him, which was unusual in a town as small as Raton where everyone knew everyone else's business whether they wanted to or not. He reined in his horse a respectful distance from where she stood and dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. He was probably in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of creek water in spring. A day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and dust covered his clothes from what must have been a long ride. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I am looking for Miss Rebecca Zimmerman. The man at the general store said I might find her here." "You found her," Rebecca replied, studying him carefully. He wore a gun on his hip, but so did most men in this territory. That alone did not make him dangerous. Still, she kept her distance, aware that she was alone out here with no neighbors close enough to hear if she needed help. "What can I do for you?" He glanced toward the barn, then back at her. "My name is Nathan Quincy. I have a ranch about 15 miles north of here, up in the foothills. I heard you have a way with birds, and I was hoping you might help me with something." "What kind of bird?" Rebecca asked, her interest piqued despite her wariness. Nathan shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "It is a golden eagle. Found her about 2 months ago with a leg caught in an old trap. I got her free and brought her back to my place, built a pen for her, but she is not healing right. The leg is infected, and she is not eating much. I have been trying everything I can think of, but nothing is working." Rebecca's heart went out to the bird even before she saw it. Golden eagles were magnificent creatures, and she had only worked with one before, back in her training days in Pennsylvania. They required special care, and most people did not know how to handle them properly. "Why did you wait 2 months before seeking help?" she asked, unable to keep the criticism from her voice. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Nearest town is Raton, and I only come down once a month for supplies. I heard about you on my last trip, but I figured I could manage on my own. I was wrong." The admission seemed to cost him something, and Rebecca appreciated his honesty. "I will need to see the bird before I can promise anything," she said. "Eagle medicine is tricky, and if the infection has gone too deep, there might not be anything I can do." "I understand," Nathan said. "Can you come today? I know it is asking a lot, but I do not think she has much time left." Rebecca considered. It was already past noon, and 15 miles would take several hours to cover. She would need to pack supplies, arrange for someone to check on her other birds, and prepare for the possibility that she might need to stay overnight if the eagle's condition was as serious as Nathan suggested. But the thought of a golden eagle suffering because of human carelessness made the decision easy. "Give me an hour to get ready," she said. "You can water your horse at the trough by the barn." Nathan's relief was visible. "Thank you, Miss Zimmerman. I truly appreciate this." As Rebecca hurried to the house to pack, she tried to ignore the small flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the prospect of treating an eagle. Nathan Quincy had honest eyes and a quiet strength that reminded her of the birds she worked with. Fierce and careful, wild but not cruel. She shook her head at her own foolishness. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for a cowboy she had just met, especially one who lived 15 miles away in the isolated foothills. She gathered her medical supplies, including the precious bottle of carbolic acid she used for cleaning wounds, clean bandages, her leather gauntlets, and the special salve she made from herbs and animal fat. She added a change of clothes, her bedroll, and some dried meat and biscuits to a canvas bag. Then she went to check on the kestrel and falcon, making sure they had enough food and water to last until tomorrow. She would ask Martha Henderson, her nearest neighbor 2 miles down the road, to look in on them if she was not back by evening. When she emerged from the barn leading her sorrel mare, Nathan was leaning against the fence, watching the horizon. He straightened when he saw her and moved to help secure her pack to the saddle. "I can manage," Rebecca said, perhaps more sharply than she intended. She had learned the hard way that accepting help often came with expectations she was not willing to meet. Nathan stepped back, hands raised. "Did not mean to offend, just trying to be helpful." "I am not offended," Rebecca said, softening her tone. "Just used to doing things myself." They rode in silence for the first hour, following a narrow trail that wound through scrubland dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite the summer heat. The landscape had a stark beauty that Rebecca had come to love, so different from the manicured parks and crowded streets of Philadelphia. "How did you end up in Raton?" Nathan asked eventually, breaking the silence. Rebecca considered how much to share. "I needed a change. The East was too confining. Family there, my father. We do not speak anymore." Rebecca kept her eyes on the trail ahead, not wanting to see whatever judgment might be in Nathan's expression. To her surprise, he simply nodded. "I know something about family trouble. My father and I had a falling out years ago. He wanted me to take over the family business in Kansas City. I wanted to raise horses and cattle out here where a man could breathe." "What kind of business?" Rebecca asked, curious despite herself. "Banking," Nathan said with a wry smile. "Not exactly suited to my temperament. Too much time indoors, Too many people trying to separate you from your money while smiling to your face. Rebecca found herself smiling back. My father was a banker too. He thought my interest in falconry was an embarrassing eccentricity that I would outgrow once I settled down with a proper husband. Did you have a proper husband lined up? Nathan's tone was casual, but Rebecca sensed genuine interest in the question. Several, according to my father. None of them interested me. They were all carbon copies of each other, proper, boring, and completely unwilling to see me as anything more than a decorative addition to their households. She paused, then added, I left Philadelphia 3 years ago, took everything I could carry and headed west. Ended up in Raton because my money ran out and I liked the look of the mountains. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, That took courage, or stupidity, Rebecca replied. Some days I am still not sure which. I vote for courage, Nathan said. Stupid people do not successfully rehabilitate injured raptors. That takes knowledge, patience, and dedication. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. Rebecca reminded herself that Nathan was a client, nothing more. He needed her expertise, and once she had treated his eagle, she would return to her ranch and her solitary life. That was how she liked it. That was how it had to be. They stopped to rest the horses around mid-afternoon, finding shade under a cluster of cottonwoods near a seasonal creek that was mostly dry but still had a few pools of water. Nathan pulled out a canteen and some jerky, offering both to Rebecca before taking any for himself. They sat on opposite sides of the largest pool, not talking, just listening to the sound of the horses cropping at the sparse grass and the distant cry of a hawk somewhere overhead. Tell me more about the eagle, Rebecca said after a while. How bad is the leg? Nathan's expression grew troubled. The trap crushed the bone just above the talon. I set it as best I could, splinted it with sticks and strips of cloth. But the wound is not closing properly. There is pus, and the bird barely fights me anymore when I try to clean it. She just lies there with her eyes half closed, and I know that is a bad sign. It is, Rebecca agreed. Raptors will fight until they have nothing left. If she is giving up, it means she is very weak. Have you been able to get her to eat anything? Small pieces of raw meat, but not much. Maybe a few ounces every other day. Nothing like what she should be eating. Rebecca did some mental calculations. A healthy golden eagle could eat a pound or more of meat in a day. If Nathan's bird was only taking a few ounces every other day, she was slowly starving to death even if the infection did not kill her first. When we get there, I will need lots of clean water, boiled if possible. And you will need to catch some live prey if you can. Rabbit, prairie dog, anything she would naturally hunt. Sometimes injured birds will eat live prey when they refuse dead meat. It triggers their hunting instincts. Nathan nodded, absorbing the information. Whatever you need, I will get it. They mounted up again and continued north, climbing gradually as the terrain became more rugged. The sun was slanting toward evening when they finally topped a ridge, and Rebecca saw Nathan's ranch spread out in the valley below. It was larger than she had expected, with a substantial barn, a main house built from logs and adobe, and several outbuildings. Horses grazed in a fenced pasture, and she counted at least a dozen cattle scattered across the grassland. You built all this yourself? She asked, impressed despite herself. Most of it, Nathan said. Had some help from neighbors during the barn raising, and I hired a few hands for the cattle roundup last fall, but most of the time it is just me and the horses. As they rode down into the valley, Rebecca noticed a large enclosure near one of the outbuildings. Even from a distance, she could see the golden eagle inside, a magnificent bird even in her weakened state. The eagle's plumage was dark brown with golden highlights at the back of her head and neck, and she stood nearly 3 feet tall despite her obvious illness. Nathan led Rebecca to the house first, insisting she settle in before they dealt with the eagle. The interior was surprisingly well maintained for a bachelor's home, with sturdy furniture and clean floors. It was not fancy, but it was comfortable and practical. He showed her to a small bedroom that he said was usually reserved for when his younger sister visited from Kansas City. "I will get started on boiling water," Nathan said. "How much do you need?" "As much as you can manage, at least 2 large pots. And I will need a clean table or surface to work on, something we can scrub down thoroughly." While Nathan worked on the water, Rebecca unpacked her supplies and changed into her oldest work clothes. Then she pulled on her leather gauntlets and went out to assess the eagle. As she approached the enclosure, the bird raised her head and fixed Rebecca with a fierce golden stare that sparked hope in her chest. There was still spirit there, still fire. If the eagle was alert enough to be wary of a stranger, she had not given up entirely. Rebecca studied the enclosure itself first. Nathan had built it well, with plenty of space for the bird to move around and perches at different heights. There was a shallow dish of water and a flat stone that looked like it had been used for feeding. The floor was covered in sand and gravel, easy to clean and better than bare earth for preventing further infection. The eagle's injured leg was immediately obvious. The bird held it at an awkward angle, and even from outside the enclosure, Rebecca could see the swelling and discoloration around the splint. She would need to remove Nathan's makeshift bandaging, clean the wound thoroughly, and assess whether the bone had set properly. If it had not, she might need to re-break and reset it, a procedure that would be traumatic for the bird and risky given her weakened condition. Nathan appeared at her shoulder, carrying a bucket of steaming water. "What do you think?" "I think you saved her life by getting her out of that trap," Rebecca said honestly. "But she has a hard road ahead. This is going to take time, probably weeks of intensive care. Are you prepared for that?" "Whatever it takes," Nathan said firmly. "I am the reason she was caught in that trap in the first place." Rebecca turned to look at him. "How so?" "It was my trap," Nathan admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. "I set it last winter trying to catch whatever was killing my chickens. Coyote, I thought, or maybe a fox. But I forgot about it, left it out there in the brush. By the time I found it this spring, it was rusted and dangerous. The eagle must have been hunting in that area and struck the trap by accident." The pain in his voice was genuine, and Rebecca felt her opinion of him shift. Many men would have simply killed an injured eagle and moved on, especially if they were worried about the bird threatening their livestock. Nathan had taken responsibility for his mistake and was doing everything in his power to make it right. "Then we will fix this together," she said. "But you need to understand that even if we save her, she might never fly again. That leg could heal wrong, or the infection could cause permanent damage. We might be condemning her to a life in captivity instead of giving her the merciful death that would let her be free." Nathan's jaw worked as he processed this. "What would you do?" "I would try," Rebecca said simply. "As long as she keeps fighting, I will fight for her too. But if she reaches a point where she is just suffering, if there is no quality of life possible for her, then we have to be willing to let her go. Keeping her alive just to ease our own guilt is cruelty, not kindness." "Agreed," Nathan said. "When do we start?" "Now," Rebecca said. "Before the light fails completely. I will need you to help me restrain her while I work. Eagles are powerful, and even a weakened one can do serious damage if she gets scared or angry. You need to protect your eyes especially. One strike from those talons and you could be blinded." They spent the next 10 minutes preparing their workspace, setting up a table near the enclosure where Rebecca would have good light and room to work. She laid out her instruments carefully, explaining what each one was for as she went. Nathan listened intently, asking intelligent questions, and proving that he had more than a passing knowledge of animal anatomy from his work with cattle and horses. Catching the eagle was the first challenge. Rebecca entered the enclosure slowly, speaking in low, soothing tones that she hoped would calm the bird. The eagle watched her approach with wary eyes, then tried to hop away on her one good leg when Rebecca got too close. It took several attempts and all of Rebecca's patience, but eventually she managed to get a towel over the bird's head, temporarily disorienting her enough that Rebecca could secure her wings and lift her carefully. The eagle was lighter than she should have been, another sign that she had not been eating enough. Rebecca carried her to the table where Nathan was waiting with a thick blanket. Together they wrapped the bird securely, leaving only the injured leg exposed. The eagle struggled briefly, then went still, conserving her energy. "Hold her steady," Rebecca instructed as she began removing Nathan's splint. "Talk to her. It does not matter what you say, just keep your voice calm and even. It helps." Nathan began talking in a low, steady voice about nothing in particular. The weather, the horses, plans for expanding the pasture next spring. Rebecca worked as quickly as she dared, unwinding the cloth strips and easing away the sticks Nathan had used to immobilize the leg. When she finally exposed the wound, she had to fight to keep her expression neutral. The infection was worse than she had feared. The area around the break was hot and swollen, with pus oozing from several places where the broken skin had not healed cleanly. The bone itself seemed to be aligned correctly, which was a relief, but the soft tissue damage was extensive. She would need to clean this thoroughly, debride the dead tissue, and pray that the carbolic acid was enough to kill the infection before it spread further. "This is going to hurt her," Rebecca said quietly. "She is going to fight, and you need to hold on no matter what. If she breaks free in the middle of this, she could injure herself worse or hurt one of us. Can you do that?" Nathan's hands tightened on the blanket. "Yes." Rebecca poured carbolic acid over the wound, and the eagle exploded into action despite her weakness. Her piercing scream split the air as she thrashed against the restraints, and Nathan had to use all his strength to keep her from breaking free. Rebecca worked as fast as she could, cleaning away the pus and dead tissue, irrigating the wound with the boiled water Nathan had prepared. Her hands were steady even though her heart was pounding, years of training overriding the natural empathy that made this part of her work so difficult. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few minutes, Rebecca finished cleaning the wound and began applying her healing salve. The eagle had stopped struggling, exhausted from her efforts to escape. Her eyes were closed, and for a terrible moment, Rebecca thought she had died from the stress. Then she felt the rapid flutter of the bird's heartbeat under her fingers and knew they still had a chance. "Almost done," she murmured, more to herself than to Nathan. She fashioned a new splint from the clean materials she had brought, wrapping the leg carefully but not so tightly that it would cut off circulation. When she was satisfied with her work, she nodded to Nathan. "We can let her go now. Put her back in the enclosure and then leave her alone for a while. She needs to rest." They carried the eagle back to her pen and unwrapped her carefully. For a moment the bird lay motionless on the ground, and Rebecca feared they had pushed her too hard. Then the golden eyes opened, fixing Rebecca with a look that seemed almost accusatory. The eagle hauled herself upright on her one good leg, wings slightly spread for balance, and let out a harsh cry that echoed off the surrounding hills. "That is a good sign," Rebecca said, relief flooding through her. "She is angry, which means she still has fight in her." Nathan let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. "Thank you. I could not have done that alone." "We are not done yet," Rebecca warned. "The infection will either get better or worse in the next few days. We need to watch her closely, change the bandage every day, and keep trying to get food into her. Do you have any fresh meat? I can get some. There is a rabbit warren not far from here. Give me an hour and I will have something." While Nathan went hunting, Rebecca stayed near the enclosure, observing the eagle's behavior. The bird had retreated to the highest perch she could reach with her injured leg and sat there watching Rebecca with those fierce golden eyes. Her head moved in small, precise increments, tracking every movement Rebecca made. This was good. Awareness meant alertness, and alertness meant the eagle had not given up. True to his word, Nathan returned within the hour carrying 2 freshly killed rabbits. Rebecca took them and prepared small pieces of meat, leaving some fur attached since raptors needed the roughage for their digestion. She placed the meat on the feeding stone, then retreated to a distance where the eagle might feel comfortable enough to eat. They waited in silence as the sun set, and the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. Stars began to emerge one by one, and a cool breeze swept down from the mountains, bringing relief from the day's heat. Just when Rebecca was about to give up and suggest they try again in the morning, the eagle mantled her wings and dropped from her perch to the ground. She hopped awkwardly toward the feeding stone, favoring her injured leg, and seized a piece of meat in her beak. "She is eating," Nathan whispered, and the joy in his voice made Rebecca smile despite her exhaustion. They watched the eagle consume several pieces of meat before she retreated back to her perch, and Rebecca felt the tight knot of worry in her chest ease slightly. It was not a guarantee of recovery, but it was a start. A bird that was eating had a reason to live. "We should get you fed too," Nathan said. "You have been working all evening without a break." Rebecca realized she was hungry, and more than that, she was tired. The combination of the long ride and the intense focus required for treating the eagle had drained her more than she had realized. She followed Nathan back to the house, where he set about preparing a simple meal of fried potatoes, beans, and some of the rabbit meat they had not given to the eagle. They ate in comfortable silence at first, too hungry to bother with conversation. But as her immediate hunger faded, Rebecca found herself studying Nathan across the table. He had rolled up his sleeves to cook, revealing forearms corded with muscle from years of hard work. His hands were scarred and calloused, but moved with surprising gentleness as he served the food. There was a quiet competence about him that Rebecca found appealing, a sense that he was completely at ease with himself and his choices. "How long have you been in New Mexico?" she asked. 5 years. Came out here right after my 22nd birthday with money I had saved and a head full of dreams about being a rancher. The first year nearly killed me. I did not know anything about running cattle in this climate, and I lost half my herd to the winter. But I learned and I adapted, and now I am making it work. "It must get lonely," Rebecca said, then immediately regretted the personal nature of the question, but Nathan did not seem offended. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I would rather be lonely and free than surrounded by people and trapped. The isolation is part of the appeal. Out here, I can be myself without worrying about what anyone thinks or what is expected of me." Rebecca understood that feeling all too well. "That is why I came west too. In Philadelphia, everything I did was judged and found wanting. I was too independent, too interested in unfeminine pursuits, too unwilling to conform. Here, people think I am a bit odd, but they leave me alone to do my work." "You are not odd," Nathan said quietly. "You are extraordinary. What you did tonight with the eagle, the knowledge and skill that took, most people could not do that. Your father was a fool not to be proud of you." The words hit Rebecca harder than she expected. She had spent years telling herself she did not need her father's approval, that she had moved beyond caring what he thought of her choices. But hearing Nathan say with such conviction that she was worth being proud of stirred something deep inside her that she had tried to bury. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "That means more than you know." They cleaned up the dishes together, moving around the small kitchen in an easy rhythm that felt natural despite having just met. When everything was put away, Nathan banked the fire and walked Rebecca to the guest room. "I will be up before dawn to check on the eagle," he said, "but you should sleep as long as you need. Today was hard work." "I want to be there when you check on her," Rebecca said. "The first 24 hours are critical. If the infection is going to worsen, it will likely happen overnight." Nathan nodded. "Then I will wake you when I get up." Rebecca lay awake for a long time after she heard Nathan's bedroom door close across the hall. The house was quiet except for the usual settling sounds of wood and adobe. And through the small window she could see stars scattered across the sky like seeds thrown by a careless hand. She thought about the eagle lying in her enclosure, fighting against pain and fear and the limitations of her injured body. She thought about Nathan, alone in this valley he had carved out of the wilderness, taking responsibility for his mistakes and doing whatever he could to make things right. And she thought about herself, about the life she had chosen and the walls she had built around her heart. She had told herself she was happy alone, that she did not need anyone else to feel complete. But tonight, working side by side with Nathan, talking easily over dinner, she had felt something she had not experienced in years. Connection, partnership, the beginning of something that could grow into more if she let it. But Rebecca had learned to be cautious. She had seen too many women lose themselves in relationships, watched friends and acquaintances sacrifice their dreams and independence for men who promised love but delivered control. She would not make that mistake. No matter how kind Nathan seemed, no matter how much she enjoyed his company, she would keep her guard up and remember that she was here to do a job, nothing more. Nathan woke her just as the first gray light of dawn was creeping across the valley. He looked as tired as she felt, and she suspected he had not slept much either. Together they walked out to the eagle's enclosure, both of them tense with anticipation about what they might find. The eagle was standing on her good leg, head tucked under one wing in sleep. As they approached, she raised her head and fixed them with her golden stare. Rebecca examined her from a distance, looking for any signs that the infection had worsened overnight. The bird's posture seemed stronger than yesterday, and when Rebecca slowly entered the enclosure to check the bandage, she was encouraged to see that the swelling appeared to have reduced slightly. "How does it look?" Nathan asked from outside the pen. "Better," Rebecca said cautiously. "Not good, but better. The carbolic acid is working. We need to keep cleaning it and changing the bandage every day for at least a week." This began a new routine. Each morning, Rebecca and Nathan would catch the eagle and repeat the painful process of cleaning and rebandaging her leg. Each evening, they would prepare fresh meat and watch to see if she would eat. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the eagle began to improve. The infection receded. The swelling decreased. The bird's appetite increased until she was eating close to what a healthy eagle should consume. During the days while the eagle rested, Rebecca found herself drawn into the daily life of the ranch. She helped Nathan with chores, learning about his horses and cattle, offering suggestions for improving his setup based on her own experiences. He was a good listener, genuinely interested in her opinions and willing to try new approaches. In turn, she learned about ranching from him, about reading the weather and the land, about the delicate balance of running an operation this size alone. The evenings were her favorite time. After dinner, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about growing up in Kansas City, about his mother who had died when he was young and his father who had never recovered from that loss. He talked about his younger sister Margaret, who was studying to be a teacher, and wrote him letters full of news and gentle nagging about when he was going to visit. Rebecca found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. About her mother's death from influenza when Rebecca was 16, and how her father had become cold and distant afterward, throwing himself into his work and expecting Rebecca to simply take over managing the household. About her desperate loneliness in Philadelphia society, surrounded by people but feeling utterly alone. About the elderly Falconer who had taken her on as a student and given her something to care about, a purpose beyond finding a husband and producing heirs. "He died 2 years before I left Philadelphia," Rebecca said one evening, her voice soft with memory. "Heart failure. One day he was teaching me how to train a Cooper's hawk, and the next day he was gone. I think that was when I finally realized I could not stay there anymore. The one person who understood me was dead, and I had nothing left to keep me." Nathan reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "I am glad you left. Glad you ended up in Raton. Glad you came here to help my eagle." Rebecca looked at their joined hands, at the way his fingers curled naturally around hers, and felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "I am glad too," she whispered. They sat there in the gathering darkness, hands linked, watching stars appear one by one across the vast New Mexico sky. Rebecca knew she should pull away, should maintain the professional distance she had promised herself. But Nathan's touch felt right in a way she could not explain and did not want to analyze too deeply. So she stayed, fingers intertwined with his, and let herself imagine what it might be like to build a life with someone who understood her. 2 weeks after Rebecca had arrived at the ranch, the eagle stood on her injured leg for the first time. It was wobbly and clearly painful, but the bird bore her own weight for several seconds before shifting back to her good leg. Nathan let out a whoop of joy that startled the eagle into mantling her wings, and Rebecca found herself laughing at his uninhibited enthusiasm. "She is going to recover," Nathan said, grabbing Rebecca by the waist and spinning her around. "You did it. You saved her." "We saved her," Rebecca corrected, but she was smiling as Nathan set her back on her feet. They stood close together, his hand still on her waist, her hands resting on his shoulders. The laughter faded as they looked at each other, and Rebecca saw in Nathan's eyes the same longing she felt burning in her own chest. "Rebecca," Nathan said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." "I know," Rebecca said, because she did. She could see it in the way he looked at her, in the gentle care he took with her comfort, in the way he sought out her company every chance he got. "I am falling in love with you," Nathan continued anyway, needing to say the words. "I know you only came here to help the eagle, and I know you value your independence. I am not asking you to give up anything. I would never ask that, but I cannot let you leave without telling you how I feel." Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment where she should step back, should thank him kindly and explain that she was not interested in romance, that she had built a good life for herself in Raton and did not need a man to complete her. But looking into Nathan's earnest face, feeling the warmth of his hand still resting on her waist, she could not bring herself to say any of those things. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I did not mean to. I tried not to." But Nathan, being here with you, working beside you, talking with you every evening, it has been the happiest I have been since leaving Philadelphia." "Then stay," Nathan said simply. "Not forever if you do not want that, but stay a while longer. Let me court you properly. Let us see where this goes." Rebecca thought about her ranch waiting in Raton, about the birds that needed her care, about the life she had built for herself. But she also thought about how empty that house felt compared to the warmth of Nathan's home. How solitary her days were compared to the companionship she had found here. She could go back and forth, she realized. Raton was only 15 miles away, a few hours' ride. She did not have to choose between her work and this man who had somehow worked his way past all her defenses. "I will stay," she said. "For a while at least. But Nathan, I need to go back to Raton regularly to check on my birds, and I am not giving up my work. It matters to me." "I would never ask you to," Nathan said fiercely. "Your work is part of who you are. I love that about you. The way you care for broken things, the way you fight for creatures that most people would give up on. I would not change anything about you." He leaned down slowly, giving Rebecca plenty of time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not want to. She rose on her toes to meet him, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape and taste of each other. Then Nathan's arms tightened around her and Rebecca pressed closer, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, and the kiss deepened into something that promised much more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the first day you arrived. What took you so long?" Rebecca teased and was rewarded with Nathan's low laugh. "I was trying to be a gentleman, not take advantage of you being stuck out here helping me." "I am not stuck," Rebecca said firmly. "I am choosing to be here. There is a difference." Over the next few weeks, Rebecca established a routine. She would stay at Nathan's ranch for 3 or 4 days at a time, helping with the eagle and gradually taking on other tasks around the property. Then she would ride back to Raton to care for her own birds, check her mail, and resupply. She asked Martha Henderson to continue looking in on the ranch when Rebecca was away, and the older woman agreed readily, clearly delighted that Rebecca had found someone who made her happy. The eagle continued to improve under their combined care. The infection cleared completely, and the bone healed straight and strong. The bird began putting weight on her injured leg more frequently, and her appetite remained healthy. Rebecca started exercising her gently, encouraging short flights within the enclosure to rebuild the muscles that had atrophied during her recovery. One evening about 6 weeks after Rebecca's first visit, she and Nathan were watching the eagle hop from perch to perch when Nathan said quietly, "She is almost ready to go, is not she?" Rebecca nodded, her throat tight. "Another week or 2. I want to make sure the leg is strong enough that she can hunt successfully, but yes, she is almost there." "What if she does not fly away?" Nathan asked. "What if we release her and she just stays here?" "Then she stays," Rebecca said. "That is her choice to make. We have given her back her freedom. What she does with it is up to her." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "You released that hawk the day we met, the one I saw flying away when I rode up. Did that bird come back?" "No," Rebecca said. "But I see her sometimes, hunting in the fields near my ranch. She is living the life she was meant to live, wild and free. That is all I ever wanted for her." "Is that what you want?" Nathan asked, turning to look at her. "To be wild and free?" Rebecca met his gaze, understanding the real question behind his words. Was she going to fly away too once the eagle was released? Was their time together just temporary, something that would end once the reason for her visits was gone? "I was wild and free when I came here," Rebecca said slowly. working through her thoughts as she spoke. No ties, no obligations, answerable only to myself. But Nathan, I have learned something these past weeks. Freedom is not the same as being alone. I can be free and still choose to build a life with someone else, as long as that person respects my independence and my work. And do I? Nathan asked. Respect your independence and your work. You do, Rebecca said firmly. You never try to stop me from going back to Rattan. You never suggest that caring for injured birds is a waste of time or beneath me. You ask about my work like it matters because to you it does. You make me feel valued for who I am, not for who you want me to be. Nathan reached for her hand. Then what are we doing, Rebecca? What is this between us? I do not know, she admitted. I have never felt this way about anyone before. It scares me how much I care about you, how much I look forward to seeing you, how empty everything feels when we are apart. Does it have to be scary? Nathan asked gently. Can it not just be good? Rebecca thought about that. All her life, she had been taught that loving someone meant losing yourself, that commitment was a trap that would steal her freedom and independence. But being with Nathan did not feel like a trap. It felt like partnership, like two people choosing to walk the same path while respecting each other's need to sometimes wander off in different directions. It can be good, she said finally. It is good. I am just not used to trusting that good things will last. Nathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Then let me prove to you that this will last. Let me show you every day that you can trust me, that I will never try to cage you or clip your wings. You are like those birds you care for, Rebecca, beautiful and fierce and meant to soar. I do not want to capture you, I just want to be someone you choose to come back to. Tears pricked at Rebecca's eyes. You are, she whispered. You already are. He pulled her close and kissed her, and Rebecca let herself sink into the embrace. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have both the freedom she craved and the love she had convinced herself she did not need. The day they released the eagle was bittersweet. Rebecca had been training her for several days, taking her out of the enclosure on a creance line and encouraging her to fly progressively longer distances. The eagle's strength had returned fully, and she could fly with grace and power that took Rebecca's breath away. There was no reason to keep her any longer except for their own selfish desire to hold on to her a little while more. They chose a morning when the sky was clear, and a steady breeze was blowing in from the west. Rebecca carried the eagle to the top of a small rise overlooking the valley, Nathan walking beside her. The bird seemed to sense something momentous was about to happen. She sat alert and focused on Rebecca's gauntleted fist, her golden eyes scanning the landscape. Last chance to change your mind, Rebecca said to Nathan, though she knew neither of them would. She deserves to be free, Nathan said. We both know that. It does not make it easier, but it is the right thing to do. Rebecca nodded. She held her arm high and felt the eagle's talons tighten briefly as the bird prepared to launch. Then she thrust her arm upward and called out a command she had used countless times before. Fly! The eagle pushed off with powerful strokes of her wings, rising rapidly into the morning air. She circled once over Rebecca and Nathan, close enough that they could see every detail of her magnificent plumage. Then she caught an updraft and began to climb, higher and higher, until she was just a dark speck against the blue sky. You think she knows we helped her? Nathan asked, his voice thick with emotion. I do not know, Rebecca said honestly, but I hope she knows she is free now, that whatever debt she might have felt is paid. She owes us nothing. They stood together watching the sky long after the eagle disappeared from view. Finally, Nathan said, you set her free even though you could have kept her, even though it was painful to let her go. That took courage. Rebecca turned to look at him, understanding the metaphor he was building. Are you asking me to set you free too, Nathan? No, he said, taking her hands in his. I am asking you to free my captive heart. Rebecca, I have been trapped for so long by expectations and duty and trying to live up to what other people wanted from me. But you make me feel free in a way I never have before. You see who I really am, and you do not try to change me. You understand the need for space and solitude, but you also know the value of companionship. You are the only person I have ever met who makes me feel like I can be completely myself and still be enough. Rebecca felt tears spilling down her cheeks, not from sadness but from the overwhelming rightness of his words. Your heart is not captive, Nathan. It never was. You were always free. You just did not realize it until now. Then will you take it anyway? Nathan asked. My free heart, offered willingly. Will you let me walk beside you wherever your path leads? I am not asking you to give up your work or your ranch. I am not asking you to become someone you are not. I am just asking if I can be part of your life, if we can build something together while still being ourselves. Rebecca thought about the question carefully because it deserved her full consideration. This man had opened his home to her, worked alongside her to save an injured eagle, respected her knowledge and skills, and never once made her feel like she needed to be less than she was to make him comfortable. He had learned about her work not because he had to, but because he genuinely cared. He encouraged her independence even when it meant being apart. He made her laugh and challenged her thinking and kissed her like she was precious beyond measure. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. Your heart, your home, your life. I want to build something with you, Nathan. I want mornings watching eagles fly and evenings on the porch watching sunsets. I want to teach you more about birds and learn more about ranching from you. I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep in your arms. I want everything, as long as I can still be myself. Nathan's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled her close and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and relief and joy into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time, giddy with the enormity of what they had just committed to. We should probably talk about practical things, Rebecca said eventually, though she made no move to step out of Nathan's arms. Like where we will live and how we will manage both properties. We can work out the details, Nathan said. Maybe we spend part of the week at your ranch and part here. Maybe we bring your birds here and set up a proper rehabilitation facility. Maybe we sell one property and build something new together. I do not care about the logistics as long as we are together. I care about the logistics, Rebecca said practically, but she was smiling. We need a plan, Nathan. We cannot just stumble forward hoping things work out. Then we will make a plan, Nathan agreed. Together. That is what partners do, right? Figure things out together, partners. The words settled into Rebecca's heart with a warmth that spread through her whole body. She had been alone for so long, making all her decisions in isolation, that the thought of having someone to plan with felt revolutionary. Not someone who would make decisions for her or override her judgment, but someone who would listen and discuss and help her think through problems. A true partner in every sense of the word. Over the next few months, Rebecca and Nathan worked out the details of combining their lives. They decided to keep both properties since each served a different purpose. Rebecca's ranch in Raton remained her base for the bird rehabilitation work, while Nathan's ranch in the foothills continued to be his center for raising horses and cattle. They spent 3 days each week at one property and 4 at the other, alternating so neither place was neglected for too long. Martha Henderson was delighted to hear about Rebecca's happiness and volunteered to help more with the Raton Ranch. Her own children were grown and scattered across the territory, and she welcomed the chance to be useful and learn more about bird care. Nathan hired a young cowboy named Tommy to help with the daily chores at his ranch, which freed up more of his time to spend with Rebecca. In December, 8 months after they had first met, Nathan asked Rebecca to marry him. Not with a grand gesture or public proposal, but quietly one evening as they sat on his porch watching snow begin to fall across the valley. He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket and held it out to her. "My mother's ring," he said. "My sister sent it to me after I wrote to her about you. She said our mother would want you to have it, that she would be happy I found someone who makes me want to be a better man." Rebecca took the ring with trembling hands. It was beautiful in its simplicity, a plain gold band with tiny flowers engraved around the edge. "It is perfect," she whispered. "Will you marry me, Rebecca?" Nathan asked. "Will you be my wife, my partner, my best friend? I promise to respect your work and your independence. I promise to listen when you talk and to value your opinions. I promise to love you exactly as you are without trying to change or control you. And I promise that no matter where life takes us, I will always be someone you can choose to come back to." "Yes," Rebecca said, sliding the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly. "Yes to everything. I love you, Nathan. I choose you freely and without reservation. I choose this life we are building together." They married in the spring of 1879 in a simple ceremony at the church in Raton. Margaret came out from Kansas City to serve as Rebecca's bridesmaid, and she and Rebecca became fast friends. Tommy stood up as Nathan's best man, and Martha Henderson cried happy tears through the entire service. The whole town turned out for the wedding breakfast afterward, and Rebecca was touched by how many people told her they were glad she had found happiness. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after the wedding. Rebecca continued her work rehabilitating injured birds, and her reputation spread throughout the territory. People would ride for days to bring her injured raptors, knowing she had the best chance of saving them. Nathan's ranch prospered as well. His horse breeding program produced animals known throughout New Mexico for their strength and intelligence, and he began teaching Rebecca how to train the young horses alongside him. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs and communicating with the kind of shorthand that only comes from deep familiarity. Nathan learned to recognize the signs that Rebecca needed solitude, those days when the weight of caring for suffering creatures became too much, and she needed to retreat to the workshop where she prepared her medicines and splints. On those days, he would quietly handle the chores and leave a plate of food outside her door, giving her space while still making sure she was cared for. Rebecca learned to read Nathan's moods too. She knew when he was worried about money or weather, when he was missing his sister, when he needed to talk through a problem, or just needed her presence beside him. She learned that his gruff silence was not anger but his way of processing difficult emotions, and that he opened up best during physical work when his hands were busy and his mind could wander. Their first anniversary came on a bright April day when the valley was covered in wildflowers, and the air smelled of sage and growing things. Nathan surprised Rebecca by taking her to a spot high in the foothills where they could see for miles in every direction. He had brought a picnic and a blanket, and they spent the afternoon lying in the sun, talking about everything and nothing. "I have been thinking," Nathan said at one point, his fingers playing absently with Rebecca's hair, "about expanding the bird facility. Building a proper aviary with multiple enclosures so you can handle more rescues at once. I talked to a carpenter in Raton and he drew up some plans. If you like them, we could start building this summer." Rebecca sat up, excitement coursing through her. "Really? Oh, Nathan, that would be wonderful. I have had to turn away so many birds because I did not have space. But are you sure? That will be expensive." "We can afford it," Nathan assured her. "The horses brought in good money this year, and I have been saving. This is important to you, which makes it important to me. Besides, I like the idea of having a legacy beyond just cattle and horses. What you do matters, Rebecca. You save lives and give creatures a second chance. I want to help you do more of that." Rebecca kissed him soundly. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not in at least 2 hours," Nathan said with mock solemnity. "I was starting to worry." She pushed him playfully, and he caught her wrists, pulling her down on top of him. They kissed in the warm sunshine, surrounded by wildflowers and the vast empty sky, and Rebecca felt happiness fill her so completely that she thought she might burst with it. Construction on the new aviary began in June and was completed by October. It was a magnificent structure with 4 separate enclosures, each large enough for a large raptor to fly short distances. There was also a smaller section for songbirds and other small species, and a dedicated medical area where Rebecca could examine and treat her patients. The carpenter had even built in a small office space where Rebecca could keep records and store her supplies. The first bird they brought to the new facility was a young peregrine falcon with a broken wing. Rebecca worked with the bird through the winter, gradually rebuilding its strength and confidence. In March, she released it from the top of the same hill where they had freed Nathan's eagle 2 years earlier. The falcon shot into the sky like an arrow, and watching it disappear into the distance, Rebecca felt the familiar bittersweet mix of joy and loss that came with every successful release. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked, his arm around her shoulders. Putting all this work into saving them just to let them go, Rebecca thought about the question. "No," she said finally, "because the whole point is to let them go. If I wanted to keep them, I would be no better than the people who capture wild birds for cages. The satisfaction is not in possession. It is in knowing that I gave them a chance they would not have had otherwise, that they are out there living wild lives because of the work we did together." "We," Nathan repeated, smiling. "I like that." "We," Rebecca confirmed, leaning into his warmth. "Everything good in my life is we now, and I would not have it any other way." As years passed, Rebecca and Nathan's partnership deepened. They faced the challenges that came with ranching in unpredictable country, including droughts, harsh winters, and the occasional confrontation with neighboring ranchers over water rights. But they faced everything together, making decisions jointly and supporting each other through difficulties. In the spring of 1881, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with complicated emotions. She wanted a child, wanted to build a family with Nathan, but she also worried about how pregnancy and motherhood would affect her work. She had seen too many women lose themselves completely to childcare, their own interests and passions sacrificed on the altar of maternal duty. Nathan sensed her anxiety even before she voiced it. "Talk to me," he said one evening, when he caught her staring into the fire with a troubled expression. "What is worrying you?" Rebecca told him everything, her fears spilling out in a rush. "What if I cannot be a good mother and still do my work? What if I have to choose? What if I lose myself the way my mother did, the way I swore I never would?" Nathan took her hands in his. "Rebecca, listen to me. We will figure this out together. Your work matters, and it will not stop mattering just because we have a child. We will hire help if we need to. We will adjust schedules. We will do whatever it takes to make sure you can still be yourself while also being a mother. You are not your mother, and I am not your father. We get to write our own story about what family looks like." His certainty helped settle her anxiety, and as her pregnancy progressed, Nathan proved true to his word. He took on more of the daily ranch work himself and expanded Tommy's responsibilities. He hired a young woman from town named Sarah to help with household tasks that were becoming difficult for Rebecca as her belly grew. He never suggested that Rebecca should stop working with the birds, though he did insist she take sensible precautions to protect herself and the baby. Their son was born in January of 1882 during a blizzard that left the valley blanketed in white. Nathan delivered the baby himself with help from Martha Henderson, since the midwife could not make it through the snow. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Nathan was terrified he would lose either Rebecca or the baby or both. But Rebecca was strong, stronger than she knew, and when their son finally arrived with a lusty cry that filled the house, Nathan wept with relief and joy. They named him William, after Rebecca's falconry teacher who had died so many years ago. Little William had his mother's dark hair and his father's creek water eyes, and from the beginning he was a content baby who seemed happy to be carried around in a sling while Rebecca worked in the aviary or Nathan tended the horses. Rebecca had worried that motherhood would feel like a trap, but instead she found it expanded her world in unexpected ways. She loved teaching William about the birds as he grew, loved watching his face light up with wonder when she showed him an eagle's feather or let him listen to a dove coo. Nathan was an attentive and engaged father, taking on half the childcare duties without being asked, and never suggesting that it was solely Rebecca's responsibility to raise their son. They fell into a new routine that made space for all the pieces of their lives. Their work, their marriage, their child, their individual needs for solitude and space. It was not always easy, and there were days when Rebecca felt pulled in too many directions, when Nathan was exhausted from being up all night with a teething baby, when money was tight and worry kept them both awake. But they navigated those challenges together, talking through problems and always coming back to their commitment to each other and the life they were building. By 1885, William was a bright 3-year-old with an endless capacity for questions and an apparent fearlessness around animals that both delighted and terrified his parents. Rebecca found herself pregnant again, and this time the anxiety was less intense. She knew now that she could be both a mother and herself, that these identities did not have to be mutually exclusive. Their daughter was born in September, arriving so fast that Nathan barely had time to wash his hands before catching her. They named her Grace, and she was a tiny, delicate thing who looked nothing like her sturdy brother. Where William had been easy and content, Grace was demanding and particular, letting the whole valley know when she was displeased about something. "She has your stubbornness," Nathan told Rebecca one evening as he walked the floor with their crying daughter while Rebecca tried to eat dinner with one hand and sort through medical supplies with the other. "And your lungs," Rebecca shot back, but she was smiling. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Nathan's reputation as a horse breeder spread beyond New Mexico, and he began receiving orders from as far away as Texas and Colorado. Rebecca's bird rehabilitation work also gained recognition, and she was occasionally asked to consult on difficult cases or teach others her techniques. They hired more help to manage the increased workload, carefully selecting people who shared their values and work ethic. In 1887, they made their first trip back east together so Nathan could finally meet Rebecca's father. Rebecca had been exchanging occasional letters with him since Margaret had written to him about the wedding, slowly rebuilding their broken relationship, one carefully worded paragraph at a time. He had expressed interest in meeting Nathan and seeing his grandchildren, and Rebecca finally felt ready to face the past she had left behind. The visit was awkward at first. Rebecca's father was older than she remembered, grayer and more stooped, and his house felt cold and empty compared to the warm chaos of the ranch. But watching him hold William and Grace, seeing genuine emotion in his eyes as he looked at his grandchildren, Rebecca felt something in her chest loosen. He would never be the father she had needed when she was young, but perhaps he could be a grandfather to her children. Perhaps it was not too late for them to have some kind of relationship, even if it could never be fully healed. "Your mother would be proud of you," he said on their last evening, the words clearly difficult for him. "I was wrong to try to force you into a life you did not want. You have built something remarkable out here, and you have made a good marriage. I am sorry I could not see that sooner. It was not enough to erase years of pain and misunderstanding, but it was something." Rebecca accepted his apology and offered her own for the harsh things she had said when she left. They parted on better terms than they had been in years, and Rebecca felt lighter on the train ride home, as if she had finally set down a burden she had been carrying for too long. The years continued to pass in a pattern of seasons and growth. William grew tall and serious, showing a gift for working with horses that delighted Nathan. Grace was fierce and independent, with a particular affinity for the birds that reminded everyone of her mother. In 1890, they added a third child to the family, another boy they named Thomas after Nathan's grandfather. Thomas was a happy medium between his siblings, neither as intense as Grace nor as serious as William, and he seemed content to trail after whichever parent or sibling would let him. Rebecca celebrated her 40th birthday in 1894, and Nathan threw her a party that brought together neighbors from miles around. Standing in the barn they had strung with lanterns, surrounded by friends and family and the children they had raised together, Rebecca felt a profound sense of gratitude. This life bore no resemblance to what her father had planned for her, or what she herself had imagined during those lonely years in Philadelphia. It was better than anything she could have dreamed, full of love and purpose, and the freedom to be fully herself. Late that night, after the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Rebecca and Nathan walked up to their favorite spot in the foothills. The valley spread below them, lights twinkling from scattered homesteads, the mountains standing dark against the star-filled sky. "Do you remember the day we met?" Nathan asked, his arm around her shoulders. "How could I forget?" Rebecca said. "You rode up to my ranch looking desperate and determined, asking me to save your eagle." "I think I was asking you to save more than just the eagle," Nathan said quietly. "I was asking you to save me too, though I did not realize it at the time. I was so lonely, Rebecca. So stuck in my own head, convinced that isolation was the same as independence. You showed me that I could have both connection and freedom, that loving someone did not mean losing myself." Rebecca turned to face him, taking his weathered hands in hers. "You saved me too, you know. You gave me a place where I could be completely myself and still be loved. You made me believe that partnership did not have to mean sacrifice. That I could have my work and have love, have independence and have family." "We saved each other," Nathan said, pulling her close. "Just like we saved that eagle all those years ago. We gave each other a second chance at living the lives we were meant to live." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting. Rebecca thought about all the birds she had released over the years, sent back into the wild to live free. She thought about Nathan's words on that spring day so long ago when he had asked her to free his captive heart. She had released him just as she released her birds, not by holding on but by letting go, by choosing him freely every single day. And in return, he had freed her too, freed her from the cage of other people's expectations, freed her to soar as high as her dreams could take her while always knowing she had a safe place to land. In 1896, Margaret finally moved to New Mexico permanently, settling in Raton and opening a school for girls. She became a regular presence at the ranch, delighting her niece and nephews with stories of city life and helping Rebecca with the increasingly complex record keeping required for the bird rehabilitation program. The sisters-in-law became close friends, bonded by their shared experience of choosing unconventional paths and their determination to live life on their own terms. William left for college in Colorado in 1898, planning to study veterinary medicine. It was hard watching him go, but Rebecca was proud that he had inherited her passion for healing animals and was pursuing it in his own way. Grace announced at 15 that she planned to be a falconer like her mother, and Rebecca began training her seriously in the art and science of raptor care. Thomas, at 8 years old, was still figuring out what called to him, but he showed promise as a horseman and loved working alongside his father. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. Rebecca and Nathan stood with their children and friends watching fireworks light up the sky over Raton, marveling at how much had changed in the 22 years since they had met. The Wild West they had known was slowly being tamed, with railroads and telegraph lines connecting once isolated communities. But here in their valley, surrounded by mountains and sky, they had managed to preserve something of that earlier wildness, that sense of endless possibility. In 1903, Rebecca and Nathan celebrated their 24th wedding anniversary by returning to the spot where they had released Nathan's eagle. They brought Grace with them this time, and Rebecca had her carry a young red-tailed hawk that was ready to return to the wild. Grace had done most of the rehabilitation work herself under Rebecca's guidance, and she deserved the honor of release. They stood together, 3 generations of bird lovers, and watched Grace lift her gauntleted fist and send the hawk soaring into freedom. The bird circled them twice, then caught a thermal and spiraled upward until it disappeared into the vast blue sky. "Did you feel it?" Rebecca asked her daughter. "That moment when the bird leaves your hand?" "Yes," Grace breathed, her eyes shining with tears and joy. "Like your heart is flying away with them, but also like you are giving them a piece of yourself to carry with them wherever they go." Nathan met Rebecca's eyes over their daughter's head, and the look they shared held everything they had built together. Love and partnership, freedom and choice, the wild joy of letting go and the quiet certainty of having someone to come home to. "That is exactly right," Rebecca said, putting her arm around Grace. "That is what it means to love something enough to set it free. And that is what real freedom is, the choice to soar alone or to build a life with others. Not because you have to, but because you want to." As they walked back down the hill together, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the young woman she had been, so determined to never need anyone, so convinced that independence meant isolation. She thought about Nathan asking her to free his captive heart, not understanding that his heart had never really been captive at all. They had both been free when they met, and they had chosen freely to build a life together, to partner rather than possess, to fly in formation while still maintaining their individual paths. The ranch continued to be a haven for broken birds and the people who loved them. Rebecca trained Grace, and eventually several other students in the art of falconry and raptor rehabilitation. Nathan's horses became legendary throughout the Southwest for their intelligence and temperament. William returned from college and opened a veterinary practice in Raton, often working alongside his mother when she had particularly difficult cases. Thomas eventually took over the daily operation of the cattle side of the ranch, proving to be a natural rancher with his father's quiet competence and his mother's attention to detail. Rebecca and Nathan grew old together gracefully, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming gnarled from decades of hard work, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They still made time for evenings on the porch watching sunsets, still walked up to their special spot in the foothills to watch birds soar, still chose each other every single day. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends who had become family, Nathan stood to make a toast. His voice was rougher than it had been in his youth, but it still carried the sincerity and strength that Rebecca had fallen in love with all those years ago. "To my wife," he said, raising his glass, "who taught me that love is not about capturing hearts but about freeing them. Who showed me that real partnership means celebrating each other's independence rather than trying to control it. Who has made every single day of the past 40 years an adventure worth living. Rebecca, you released my captive heart, and in return I got to spend my life watching you soar. I would not change a single moment." Rebecca stood and kissed him to applause and cheers from their assembled loved ones. "And I would not change anything either," she whispered against his lips. "You gave me everything I did not know I needed. Freedom and love, independence and family, space to be myself and someone who would always welcome me home." They lived their remaining years in the valley they loved, continuing to work with birds and horses and cattle until their bodies would not let them anymore. They sat together on the porch and told stories to their grandchildren, teaching them about respect for wild things and the importance of choosing freely in all aspects of life. They held hands and watched the sun set over mountains that never changed, while the world around them transformed in ways they could never have imagined when they were young. Rebecca passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1926 at the age of 71, surrounded by her family and with Nathan holding her hand. Her last words were about a red-tailed hawk she could see through the window, soaring free against the blue New Mexico sky. Nathan followed her 6 months later, and the family said his heart had simply been too tired to keep beating without her. They were buried together on the hilltop where they had released so many birds, where Nathan had asked Rebecca to free his captive heart all those years ago. The stone was simple, with just their names and dates and a single line that Grace had chosen. They flew free together. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through William and Grace and Thomas to their children and grandchildren. It remained a place where injured birds were healed and released, where horses were trained with patience and respect, where people could come to remember that freedom and love were not opposing forces, but complementary truths that could exist beautifully together. And sometimes, on clear days when the wind was right, people swore they could see two hawks soaring together over the valley, circling and diving in perfect synchronization, wild and free and forever choosing each other against the vast New Mexico sky. Whether it was real or legend did not matter. What mattered was the truth at the heart of the story, a truth that Rebecca and Nathan had lived and proven through 40 years of partnership. True freedom was not the absence of connection, but the presence of choice. And true love was not about capturing and keeping, but about celebrating and releasing, knowing that what came back to you freely was worth more than anything you could ever cage. They had understood this from the beginning, two wild hearts who chose to fly together, and their legacy lived on in every bird that was healed and released, in every horse that was trained with gentleness, in every person who learned that you could be fully yourself and still be part of something larger. The story of the Falconer and the Cowboy became part of local legend, told and retold around fires on cold winter nights, a reminder that the best love stories were not about possession but about freedom, not about changing someone, but about celebrating who they already were. Rebecca had released Nathan's heart from captivity, just as she released her birds, not by unlocking a cage, but by showing him that he had always had the key. And together, they had built a life that honored both their wild spirits and their deep connection, proving that love and freedom could soar together, two wings of the same magnificent bird.